Some of the tables found were dated around 707 BC. They reveal the fate of the Israelites as they escaped from the land of their captivity. These tablets form the missing links that enable us to identify the modern day descendants of the lost tribes of Israel. In doing so, we increase our knowledge of Bible history and experience a dramatic revision of our preconceived ideas of Bible prophecy. Welcome to the journey. May this space inspire you to ask questions, explore the unknown, and most importantly, to awaken. This is the Library of Awakening. Alrighty, what is going on, Library of Awakening family? Welcome back to another afternoon read. In today's episode, we're going to be diving into the missing links discovered in Assyrian tablets by Raymond, Capt. Before we jump into this one, though, I just wanted to take one quick second and give a shout out to all of the most recent and older followers here at the Library of Awakening, as we have just surpassed 422 subscribers. Really do appreciate the love and the support that everybody shows this new and upcoming channel. And if you're not subscribed to the platform, then do us that favor. If you enjoy these videos, make sure that before you head off the channel, you're subscribed. Make sure that you guys are tapping into the daily shorts that we're uploading. And almost every other day, we've been pretty consistent reading some good chapters of some very interesting books from within inside the CyberX Discord in the Library of Awakening section. Speaking of which, before we jump into this book today, I'm going to try to get to the preface and the first chapter of this book, as it sparked my interest as I was scrolling through the books section in the Discord. I came across some other very interesting and older text. Now, I know that a lot of you guys like the older books in the Discord that we have. And so here are some that I found from over 100 years ago, almost 100, actually, yeah, 150 years old. This is from 1875. This book was very interesting. It's called Ancient Pagan and Modern Christian Symbolism. If we go and we take a look inside this one, the artwork is just so extravagant and detailed. It's a huge, huge book here. Lots of chapters, lots of pages, and we have so many different symbols broken down in detail with segments on each and every single symbol. I really like this one. I'm definitely going to dive into this one, maybe create some shorts on this one in the future. Coming back over here, we have another book from 1875. This one is titled Ancient Symbol Worship, the Influence of the Phallic Idea, Religions of Antiquity, also from the year 1875. So lots of historical books in this community. Again, if you guys want access to any of these books, head over to cyberxtrading.com. We'd love to have you on the team. Tap into the Library of Awakening section. Tomorrow, Friday afternoon, is going to be our book club. Can't wait to dive into one of the books that we dropped as our homework with the community members. This book here, even 1930, Egyptian Civilization. Crazy how in just 4 years, 1930 is going to be 100 years ago. How crazy is that, right? Egyptian Civilization and Sumerian Origin, Real Chronology. Definitely going to tap into that one in a future video. Nonetheless, let's jump into today's read. So this is going to be the missing links discovered in Assyrian tablets, the remarkable discovery of Assyrian tablets that reveal the fate of the long lost tribes of Israel. This one sparked my interest looking at the table of contents. This is also by Raymond, Capt. And coming down here, just taking a look real fast at the table of contents before we jump into the preface. Here we have the land between the rivers, the Semites, the Israelites, pre-captivity migrations of Israel, the captivity of Israel, and it goes on. So definitely an interesting one to be paying attention to. Looks like we have a lot of ancient tablets, pictures, infographics, and hopefully some really good commentary in this book. So let's dive in, starting here with the preface, and then we're just going to read, and I'm going to attempt to give you guys as much of my time as I possibly can today. Again, if you all enjoy, do me that favor, smash that thumbs up button, subscribe to the platform. We do appreciate the love and the support, and I'm super ecstatic at how organic this platform has grown over the past month. So let's keep that momentum up. Starting at the top of this, it says, for centuries, let me zoom in a little bit, see if I can get a little bit in there for you guys. There we go. For centuries, our most famous seats of learning, universities, colleges, and theological institutions have been at a loss to solve the question, what was the ultimate fate of the so-called lost tribes of Israel? in Assyrian captivity. Mind you, again, I'm not going to be doing any editing or restructuring of myself reading these books. So if I stumble on my words, I mispronunciate, let me rekindle my thought process, take a second, pause, get some water, and I will continue. Although there is an abundance of prophecy in the Bible concerning the destiny of the house of Israel, there is no record of its history in exile. The prevailing theory held by modern theologians is that they were cast away, simply integrated with the people of the lands of their captivity. However, such conclusions are in contradiction to the everlasting covenants God made with Abraham and his descendants. Also, the prophets Hoshea and Amos both foretold of the Israelites' captivity. They made it very plain. Israel would not be lost forever, but would eventually be restored as a nation. In Hosea 9:17 and Amos 9:8-9. Seemingly, the ancient Assyrians alone held the answer to this biblical problem, but they and their kingdom have long since passed away. Up to the middle of the 19th century, the student of ancient history had little or no knowledge of the Assyrians except what the Old Testament and the Greek historians could give them. From the Bible, he knew that Nineveh was the capital of a cruel and powerful nation whose people God used to punish Israel for her adultery and disobedience. The names of the Assyrian sovereigns, Tiglath-Pileser, Shalmaneser, Sargon, and others, were remembered as being synonymous with violence, cruelty, and sadistic killings. The Assyrian captivity of the northern kingdom of Israel was an eternal object, a lesson of the doom awaiting those who continue to break God's statutes and commandments. In spite of the terrible experiences of the northern kingdom of Israel, strange to say, the southern kingdom of Judah did not learn its lesson or heed the warning. The scriptures state that they continued to sin even more than the northern kingdom. In Jeremiah, I'm assuming that is 3:6-11. So we find the same punishment being met out to Judah when a greater part of the southern kingdom of Israel was also carried away in captive to Assyria. The inhabitants of Jerusalem successfully resisted the Assyrians and lived to see the destruction of Nineveh by the Babylonians before their city fell to the armies of Nebuchadnezzar. The people, together with scattered pockets of Israelites missed by the Assyrians, were carried away to Babylon to become known as the remnant of Judah. History records the return of less than 50,000 Judeans and other mixed people to Jerusalem after Cyrus, king of the Persians, conquered the city of Babylon. But what happened to the others? Josephus gives the figure at several hundred thousand taken captive by Nebuchadnezzar to Babylon, and the Israelites taken captive by the Assyrians previously must have been an even larger number. After a lapse of over 2,500 years, it might be thought that all hope of solving this biblical problem has been lost in the midst of antiquity. However, during the last 100 years, archaeologists have unearthed and published the original contemporary records of the Assyrians who took the Israelites captive. It is from these records, housed today in the British Museum, that vital clues have recently come to light. Assyrian artists have given us graphic pictures inscribed on wall plaques of the subjection of the cities of the Israelites and the deportation of the inhabitants to captivity in Assyria. Assyrian scribes also recorded on clay cuneiform tablets the record of the Israelites' sojourn in captivity. These clay tablets were found in the excavations of the Assyrian Royal Library of Ashurbanipal at Nineveh in 1850 AD. Later, they were translated by Professor Lore Waterman of the University of Michigan. The Waterman translations were published in 1930. Their relevance to Israel was overlooked at the time. This was undoubtedly because they were in complete disorder and among hundreds of miscellaneous texts dealing with many matters of state. I think it's crazy how these ancient texts were only recently discovered within, let's say, the last, 150 to 175 years, and then only translated within the last 90. How crazy is that? This was undoubtedly because there were in complete disorder or they were in complete disorder among hundreds of miscellaneous texts dealing with many matters of state. Contributing to this situation was the fact that Assyrians called the Israelites by other names during their captivity. Some of the tables found were dated around 707 BC. They reveal the fate of the Israelites as they escaped from the land of their captivity. These tablets form the missing links that enable us to identify the modern day descendants of the lost tribes of Israel. In doing so, we increase our knowledge of Bible history and experience a dramatic revision of our preconceived ideas of Bible prophecy. Let's go ahead and highlight that right there. In the pages that follow, the writer has attempted no more than a brief review of the origin and history of the Israelites, a survey of the Assyrian inscriptions and cuneiform tablets that record the deportations of Israel as related to biblical and secular history, their sojourn in captivity, and a synopsis of their migrations to their new homelands. In Western Asia, there is a long valley of separating. Let's reread that and let me zoom this in. That's why. In Western Asia, there is a long valley separating the deserts of northern Arabia from the Median Mountains on the western frontier of Persia. Through this valley flows the river Euphrates, 1,800 miles, and the river Tigris, 1,500 miles. Their separate sources are to be found in the mountains of Armenia, on the opposite slopes of the same range. These two primal rivers join at Qurna and, under the name of the Shat al Arab, flow as a single stream into the Persian Gulf. Between the two rivers, in an immense plain which extend from the mountains of Kurdistan to the Persian Gulf, this plain, known as Mesopotamia, Greek for between the rivers, contains hundreds of thousands of square miles. Well adapted to high cultivation, this area once sustained a huge population. The northern part of the plain is higher than the southern. The soil of the lower portion is especially fertile. Canals leading from the two rivers have distributed their life sustaining fluid and deposits for ages. As a result of this fertile condition of the soil, it has been possible from time immemorial for the inhabitants to raise grain, cultivate the palm, and grow many varieties of fruit bearing trees. The floods of the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, combined with ordinary variations of river courses over a long period of time, make it impossible to say with respect to any portion of the alluvial plain that it may not have been, at some former period, the bed of one of the other rivers. Still, it would seem, on the whole, a law of compensation prevails. As a result, the general position of the streams in the valley is not very different now than what it was some 4,000 years ago. The lower portion of the valley became known as the land of Sumer and Akkad, which later became part of Babylonia. The extreme northern portion became known as Assyria. The Bible refers to Babylonia in whole or part as the land of the Chaldees and the land of the Shinar or Shinar. The land continues to grow as the result of silt deposits each year by the Tigris and Euphrates rivers at the rate of about 90 feet a year, or less than 2 miles in a century. Since Alexander the Great, the waters of the Persian Gulf have receded more than 48 miles from the shore. Apart from the torrential rains occurring in November and December and a few lighter showers in the spring, the climate is extraordinarily dry. As early as April, the heat is very uncomfortable. In the summer, it is simply overpowering, often rising to 110 degrees and even 120 degrees in the shade. The summer southeast breeze, which comes off the sea, loses all its moisture as they pass over the deserts and add to the discomfort of the inhabitants by filling the air with a fine sandy dust which clogs the membranes of the nose and throat. The earliest settlers of Babylonia were the Sumerians, a people whose origin is unknown. The Greek historian Herodotus, 5th century BC, had never heard of the Sumerians. Berosus, a Babylonian scholar who lived about 250 BC, referred to them as a legendary people, half fish and half man, who had emerged from the Persian Gulf and settled along the coast, bringing with them a knowledge of agriculture, writing, and metalworking. It was not until about 2,000 years after Berosus that the Sumerians were rediscovered. When the Sumerians first settled by the banks of the Euphrates River, it must have been on the sandy plateau to the west of the river where the city of Ur, the modern Megaer, was later built. The Sumerians found the land between the rivers as pestiferous, marsh, and inundated by the unchecked overflow of the rivers which passed through it. The reclamation of the marsh was the first work of the newcomers. The rivers were banked out and the inundations controlled by means of canals. All this demanded no little engineering skill. The eminent professor of Assyriology at Oxford, Rev. A.H. Seiss, wrote in 1899 that the creation of Babylonia was the birth of the science of engineering. One difficult problem faced by Sumerian farmers was that the level of the Euphrates rose quickly and at the wrong time of the year for crops. Just as the plowing was complete, the fields were likely to be flooded. Then, during the summer, when the river was at its lowest, the crops were most in need of water. Their solution was, like all great inventions, surprisingly simple. When the spring flood was at its height, water rose above the ridges of the ancient riverbanks, thus inundating land much higher than the normal river level, or inundating land. That's an interesting word. Inundating. Say that 10 times fast. Land much higher than the normal river level. During earlier summer, when the river water began to subside, the bold farmers blocked its exit to the river, thereby forming shallow lakes. Then the water was gradually channeled along specially prepared ditches into the fields, its flow being regulated by wooden gates, which shut off the flow when soil in the fields was sufficiently moist. By building dikes to hold back the floods and reservoirs to store water, the Sumerians were able to turn the natural sandy, barren portions of the desert into fertile ground. They grew wheat indigenous to the area, each plant yielding between 200 and 300 grains. The grain grew so fast that it had to be harvested promptly or left for the cattle to graze upon. Sorghum sorghum and sesame plants grew almost to the size of bushes. In the beginning, the Sumerians plowed the ground with stone hoes and cut their grain with clay sickles. Then they learned to use metals and broke the ground with metal plows. These plows had funnel shaped containers filled with the seed that filtered down through funnels as oxen pulled the plows. When the grain ripened, the farmers would cut it with a copper sickle, which replaced the clay sickle. Then the grain was threshed by pulling a heavy stone across the stalks and winnowing it by throwing it into the air to separate the chaff from the good grain. Other food produced by the Sumerians included eggplant, which took the place of the modern potato, onions, radishes, beans, and lettuce. Fruit produced, including grapes, figs, melons, and apples. The native palm trees that were found along the riverbanks were planted into orchards. In addition to providing dates, the palm trees supplied a host of other needs, a sort of bread, a sort of sugar, a sort of wine, vinegar, and threads from which fabrics were woven. Beams of palm trunks were used for construction of buildings, and date pits were used by the blacksmiths to heat their furnaces and farmers to feed their cattle. Sheep, goats, pigs, and buffaloes. A Persian inscription lists 360 uses for the palm tree. The wild animals indigenous to Babylonia appear to be chiefly the following: lion, leopard, lynx, wildcat, hyena, wolf, jackal, wild boar, buffalo, stag, gazelle, fox, a hare, badger, and the porcupine. The slow flowing rivers swarmed with many varieties of fish, including carp and barbel, that grew to a large size. Eel was also found in abundance and was considered a delicacy. While Babylonia was exceedingly rich in flora and fauna, it was exceedingly poor in mineral wealth. The alluvium was absolutely destitute of metals and stone. What stone we find utilized in building had to be transported long distances over land. Overcoming such engineering difficulties required advanced skills. Developing these skills helped the people achieve a greater mechanical ability, to which in turn produced a higher civilization. As early as 3000 BC, building stone was brought down the Euphrates River by rafts from Lebanon and Amanus, a considerable land journey. In the course of time, problems in river transportation and construction of navigable rafts were solved. Although the early inhabitants did acquire sufficient stone for their great buildings and inscriptions, it was necessary to find less costly and more abundant building material for their homes. There was beneath their feet an inexhaustible supply of the finest clay. This was readily molded into bricks. Some of these were dried in the sun and were then deemed sufficient for filling in the interior of walls. Others were baked in kilns used for facing the exterior walls. The same material was also used in the manufacture of books or tablets. The Sumerian records, which reach back into Romotest times, never mention any other land of origin. Sumer and Akkad were names apparently not known in the very early times, although they appear to be ethnically members of the Great White Race. The Sumerians were not Semitic in ethnological usage for a branch of the Caucasian or white race, show no relationship to the Semitic nomads of the Arabian desert who overran Mesopotamia by the year 3500 BC. The Sumerians were not descended from the biblical Adamic branch, starting at about 5400 BC, because evidence and artifacts of their culture has been found dating many centuries earlier. On the southern edge of the plain, on what was then the coastline of the Persian Gulf, the Sumerians built the town of Eridu, which became a center of maritime trade. Its site is now marked by the mound of Abu Shashran, Nawawas. Today, it is nearly 150 miles from the sea, therefore, it must go back to about 7,500 years, or around 5,500 BC. A little to the northwest, with its temple to the moon god, was a colony of Eridu. The latest excavations at Eridu have uncovered no less than 14 temple vaults, each one built over the other, taking us back in time into the 4th, 5th, and 6th millennium BC. At Jermo, in northern Iraq, an excavation by the University of Chicago discovered a village dating back to about 6000 BC. Several clay figurines found that there must be the earliest existing examples of the sculptures, considering that they are almost 8,000 years old. Most recently, archaeologists have discovered something else. No matter how far they delve into this cradle of mankind, the beginnings of human settlements invariably are buried still deeper in the past. No less than 26 stratas, each belonging to a different period, have been excavated in a hill, Tepe Gara, north of Mosul, that rises some 40 feet above the plain of the Tigris. The earliest records of the Sumerians reveal a class of free landholding citizens working their land with numerous slaves and trading with caravans and small boats up and down the rivers. Over these free middle class people were the officials and priests and aristocrats about the town. Such communities controlled the land for only a few miles round about the towns, but formed the political unit or state. Eventually, the power of rule was consolidated into a single person who set himself up as king. For over 1,000 years, kings succeeded kings, many of whom we know nothing, often not even their names. From Sumerian inscriptions, one of the earliest Sumerian kings was Vina, circa 3000 BC. He is seen surrounded by his royal family on an inscribed tablet. Another original inscription documents the Sumerian ruler Beragisi, 2630 to 2600 BC. Two known fragments of votive bowls designate him as king of Kishi. Tradition credits him with the disarmament of Elam to the east. He is said to have carried its weapons away, perhaps to pacify it, perhaps to prevent it from raiding Sumer. On an inscription carved in a stone on a suburban temple outside there is pictorial descriptions of the earliest known record of the art of warfare developed by the Sumerians. The king, whose face is broken off from the stone, marches at the right, heading his troops, who follow in a compact group. This grouping of men together in a mass, forming a single fighting group, is called a phalanx. Such discipline was unknown at this time in Egypt. The inscription also pictures the Sumerian troops carrying spears set for the charge. Tall shields cover their entire bodies, and they wear close fitting helmets, probably of leather. They are marching over dead bodies, perhaps symbolic of the overthrow of their enemies. The language of the Sumerians was quite unlike that of any other, neither Semitic nor Indo European nor Egyptian in character. It was a living spoken form of speech from before 3500 BC to about 2050 BC. Then it became a dead classic language. In its written form, it originally was pictorial, each symbol seemingly representing a complete word and capable of being read in almost any language. Sumerian writing finally possessed about 600 signs. These included ideograms representing ideas or things and phonograms denoting syllables. Often, ideograms were added as determinatives. The results of the combination formed certain words. The Sumerian system never developed an alphabet of letters which made up the syllables. That is, there were signs for syllables like kar or ban, but no signs for the letters k or r or b or n, which made up such syllables. Although the civilization of the southern Babylonian in the period of 4000 2000 BC was basically Sumerian, during a large part of this time it was influenced by Semitic civilization. North of the Sumerians in a region called Akkad, a Semitic language speaking people known as Akkadians moved into the land about 3800 BC. Their oldest city, Kish, originally founded by the Sumerians, is situated at a point where the two great rivers are closest together. Kish is named in the earliest Babylonian lists as the first city to furnish a family or dynasty of kings in Babylonia. Near Kish was found the famous temple of the male Bel at Nippur. The Sumerian civilization was already several millennium old by the time the Semites appeared in Babylonia and the seeds of death were in it. The Semitic civilization, on the other hand, was instinctively full of life and vigor. It was inevitable that it would permeate at first slowly and then rapidly into the senile culture of the Sumerians. Raids by the Elamites and non Semitic people who had moved into and settled in the towering mountains bordering the southeast Babylonia hastened the end of Sumerian civilization as a political factor, and by 2450 BC, a Semitic civilization was the dominant force in Babylonia. So that is it for the first chapter and the preface of this book, Missing Links Discovered in Assyrian Tablets. Honestly, it was just an introduction almost in a sense to the Sumerians. Nonetheless, still great text, still great information to soak up and read on the search for a deeper understanding of these ancient people. As always, many blessings to you guys. If you enjoyed, do me that favor, smash that thumbs up button and subscribe. Don't forget that if you guys want to read this book more in depth, you can always find it inside the private CyberX Discord, diving into some of the other chapters. Let me know in the comments down below if you guys want me in future video breakdowns to continue reading more of the chapters from this book, digging a little bit deeper into other chapters listed here on the table of contents. As always, be cognizant, be aware out there, continue to research and enlighten yourselves, and I'll see you guys in the next video breakdown. I know some of the perspectives that I share may be as challenging for you as they once were for me. But isn't that the beauty of exploration? Every perspective, no matter how unconventional, has something valuable to contribute to it if it's shared. Knowledge is not absolute. It's a living, breathing phenomena, shaped and reshaped over time. The important thing is not always be right, but to always be curious. Explore freely, share boldly, and learn deeply. And don't rely solely on others to validate your discoveries. Stand firm in integrity, even in the face of criticism. Remember that growth always means embracing the humility to admit when we're wrong. Learning from our errors is not a setback, it's the very essence of our progress. So, welcome to the journey. May this space inspire you to ask questions, explore the unknown, and most importantly, to awaken. This is the Library of Awakening,